Good afternoon, everybody on the East Coast, and good morning in the West, and whatever time it might be in the UK, because we've had some UK artists on the last couple weeks. Wasn't Jessa Liversidge just wonderful yesterday with her harmonies and the way she layers her vocals? It's super amazing, and she was delighted to help us out, as was my mate George and Inez Delgado, all courtesy of Music for Dementia. Thank you for welcoming them into our fold and introduced me to them. That was fabulous. I'm all gussied up here today because I had a gig of my own at our local Catholic church. It was my first live gig in since COVID, and I have to say I was just a tinge nervous, but all went well. I didn't offend anybody as far as I could see, and we had a great old time. So some of you yesterday were trying to scan the survey, and I didn't realize that the QR generator that I used was a free trial, and then he wanted me to charge me. So I found an actual free, as in free forever, QR generator. And so at the end of today's show, there'll be, again, 2 QR codes, one for evaluating today's program. But you can also use that if you were watching yesterday's program. You can use that as well and evaluate that as well. Yesterday's performer was Jessa. So you could just put Jessa on the form. And today we have Gloria Hoffner. And so I'm going to put my headphones on and pick a switch here, and we're going to talk to her in a second. Give me 1 second. There she is. Hello, Gloria.
Hi, Anthony.
How are you?
I'm great. How about yourself?
I'm doing really well. So we've known each other for a lot of years, and why don't you tell, a lot of people are very familiar with you because you've done so much work for NAP over the years, and you've keynoted conferences and things like that. But why don't you give them, for those who are new to you, a brief history of Gloria and what you did in your prior life, because that's how we met, and then what you turned this career into. And then, I'll give you the stage in a second, but why don't you tell us a little bit about that first?
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm very glad to be here. And so my background is that my previous career, I was a journalist. I was a news reporter with the Philadelphia Inquirer and graduated a degree in journalism and minor in music. And I did that for about 30 years. And now I have to say to people exactly what a newspaper is. So I always loved science, wanted to be an astronaut when I was in 7th grade, wrote to NASA, was told there were no women in the American astronaut program. So I love science, and anytime I got a chance to interview a scientist, that was great, read on my own. And after I left the newspaper in January of 2007, I got certified nationally in activities because I loved the whole idea of doing activities. I belong to a band that plays a monthly free concert at a nursing home. Like Anthony, I've done lots of things at church, Girl Scout leader, Boy Scout leader. So it was a natural fit. And in October of 2007, I came up with the idea to do a program on the anniversary of Sputnik for the nursing home where I was playing music. The activity director said, yeah, why don't you do that? So we did a program on space for the anniversary of Sputnik, 50 years. And at the end of that, the residents there said to me, this was great. What are we going to do next month? I hadn't thought about it. So from there, it blossomed into lots of different topics. It won the NCAP Award for Best New Idea. And then I started doing conventions. So I've been to 32 states and 3 times in Canada. I ended up publishing 2 books, Science for Seniors and North American Travels, which are both on Amazon. And I also wrote a science column for Activity Forecasting Magazine, New Day Magazine, which both sadly were closed due to COVID. But I'm still writing the science column for Activity Connection. And I have a blog at scienceforseniors.net in case you want to download some more ideas after this program.
So certainly a reinvention story all your own and a rock star in this industry. So you're going to do a program for us on the oceans. I'm going to turn it over to you now. You get started anytime you want, and we'll see about quarter of 10 of the hour, and we'll just have a final little chat, and then I'll close the show. All right. Thank you. It's all yours, Gloria.
Thank you, Anthony. So, we're going to talk about the ocean. And the reason I chose the ocean is because the ocean covers more than 70% of the surface of our planet. Most of our planet is covered in water. And most of the life on our planet lives in the ocean. The largest forest in the world is in the ocean, even down to this is a piece of volcanic rock from the bottom of the ocean. Most of the volcanoes on our planet are actually in the ocean. So the ocean covers the majority of the surface of the planet. The ocean at its deepest is 6.8 miles deep. But have you ever wondered, where did the water come from? So a lot of times people will say to me, well, I guess the water came from the rain. You have to go back in time before rain. If you go all the way back in time to the beginning of our planet, our solar system, and the universe, you go way back. So the universe is 13.7 billion years old. Then our sun is about 7 billion years old, 5 to 7 billion years old. Planet's about 5 billion years old. When the planet was very new and very hot, very, very hot. Then, as now, there were comets whirling around in space. Think of comets as a snowball with a rocky core. So they're frozen. And all you have to imagine is if you put a snowball on a hot stove, it would melt. Water runs downhill. That means that the water melting from the comets hitting the hot Earth billions of years ago is where the water came from, because it melted and filled the lowest parts of the planet, which would be the oceans. Now, sometimes people say, well, how do they know that for sure? Actually, they sent a probe out to a comet. The probe was called Stardust. Stardust measured the water coming off of the comet, and the water coming off of that comet was exactly the same as the water you brushed your teeth with this morning. Not every comet. Some comets have heavy water, but they have measured the exact same water. So they believe that 80% of the water on our planet in the ocean came from comets. The other 20% come from the condensation formed by the heating up of the planet deep in the rocks and in the volcanoes. Now then you're probably thinking, okay, if the water came from there, where does the salt come from? Because obviously the ocean is salt water. You can't drink it. You need salt for your body to live. The expression worth your weight in salt comes from ancient times when Roman soldiers were paid in bags of salt. The better the soldier, the more salt. And then that salt could be traded and used as their currency. But the salt we have, table salt, and the salt that's in the ocean, that comes because as the rain washes over the land and the water runs downhill and eventually into the ocean, it picks up minerals from the land, and that's where the salt comes from. So if you had been here when the oceans were new, the oceans would be much, much less salty than they are today. Every day they get a little bit saltier. If you said, I was looking for something different to do this summer, I think I'll remove all the salt from all the world's oceans and have fresh water in the ocean. If you could do such a thing, it turns out there is enough salt in the ocean that piled up on the land, it would be over 5 feet deep in salt. Now, in addition to that, you have to think about the recycling of the water. The wonderful, wonderful thing about our planet, one of many, is that every second of every day, the water is being recycled. So the sun comes out. Right now, I'm in Media, Pennsylvania, where it's 93 with a heat index of 100. The sun evaporates the water from the surface, draws it up into clouds. When clouds get heavy with moisture, gravity pulls that water back down as rain, snow, sleet, hail, lands on the planet, becomes water, goes into the ocean or into the lakes or under the driveway, is evaporated and returns to cloud. The scientists estimate it takes about 8 hours to go from water to evaporation to cloud to back to water again. So don't believe anybody selling you bottled water that this is untouched water. There's no untouched water on the whole planet. If you bought the most expensive bottled water, it would still be the water that some cockroach was drinking 3 million years ago, because all the water wonderfully recycles on the planet. So now that we know that the oceans cover most of the planet and that the oceans contain most of the life on our planet, a lot of times people think, well, that must mean fish, as in all the fish in the ocean. Well, it's true. There's over 36,000 species of fish and still growing in the ocean. But every single creature in the ocean is not a fish. If you're wondering what makes a fish, to be a fish, you need 3 things. First of all, you have to have gills. If you don't have gills, you're not a fish. Secondly, you have to have bones. All fish have bones. If you don't have bones, you're not a fish. And third, all fish have a fish bladder. And that fish bladder is what enables them to float. So those are the characteristics of a fish. Now, when you're a fish, such as this is a cowfish. Have a good look at him. Her, if it's a male one, it's a bullfish. Here's the front. Called that because in a male, there's little horns here at the top of its head that ancient sailors thought looked like a bull. So this fish swims off the coast of South Africa. And when you're a fish, your big worry in life is not to be eaten by something bigger. For that reason, fish swim together as a group that we call a school of fish, because then they look larger to predators who may not be able to spot one individually. So we're going to go from this little fish to dun 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 dun. Everybody's probably either seen Jaws, heard the music, or knows the expression. This is the mouth of a black fin-tipped shark. And sharks have been on our planet for over 500 million years. Right? Sharks are not fish. They're not fish because, as we said, a fish has to have gills, has to have bones, has to have a fish bladder. And in the case of sharks, they have no bones whatsoever. What's in your nose and your ears are cartilage. And a shark only has cartilage, no bones. Sharks do not have gills protruding from them. Sharks have slits on the side of their neck, and those slits allow water to pass over, and they extract the water. So they don't have gills. And finally, sharks don't have a fish bladder. What sharks have is they have so much oil in their liver that oil enables them to float. Sharks are one of the few creatures that don't get cancer, and scientists are actually studying shark oil to consider whether or not that might be a way to cure cancer in humans. Now, sharks are pretty amazing creatures. They range from a dwarf shark, could be only 6 inches in size, to a whale shark, which is almost the length of 3 full-size school buses. There are over 230 different species of sharks, and unfortunately, sharks are endangered because a lot of sharks get entangled in tuna nets and other big fish nets, and fishermen were killing them and throwing them overboard. So the danger from sharks in the movies, that's an exaggeration because it's a movie. In truth, on the entire planet, less than 12 people a year are attacked by a shark. And of that number, less than 5 people a year are killed by a shark. Sharks have 3 rows of teeth. So when one tooth falls out, another tooth comes in. You will never ever be at the dentist, see the rows? You'll never ever be at the dentist waiting for a shark to get a cavity filled. Sharks have a lot of positive things about them. Sharks have a sense of a GPS built in their brain. This is an epilept shark, preserved. And that enables them to swim in totally black water where no sunlight reaches on a straight line and get exactly where they're going. Sharks can detect 1 drop of blood in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Sharks can pick up the electric current in a fish and hone in on it for dinner. What sharks can't do is they can't see well. And because they can't see well, for that reason, when fish swim together, they look like a bigger object. And also for that reason, that's why they sometimes attack surfers. They'll swim up to the bottom of a surfboard with hands and feet hanging over it, and it looks like the bottom of a seal, which a shark would eat. And then they'll eat the board and realize that's not a seal. So they do lots of things well, but they don't see well. Now, for any of you single ladies out there, I'm going to advise you, do not date a shark. All male sharks are one-night stands. So what they'll do is they'll bite the fin in the back of the female shark, right here, the center fin, grab onto it, pull her straight down, have their way, and then swim off. They never stick around. And female sharks, most of them lay eggs and then swim off. A few of them, the eggs hatch in a sac in their body, and they still swim off. So for any of you who raised children and you had to do book reports and costumes and make 36 cupcakes when they forgot to tell you last night that you needed them for the party, never happens to a shark. Sharks are solo fighters. They'll see that another shark started tearing off pieces, and they'll tear off a piece of a creature. They don't chew. If a shark does bite your ankle and takes you, they will snap, twist their body, and break off the bone and swallow your whole foot. Unlike in the movies, sharks do not have the ability to chew. They can only bite, twist, snap, and swallow. And they might go a few days, depending on the size of the meal. Now, this little epaulette shark is pretty amazing because it can walk out of the water. What it does is, when it lives in tidal pools, Australia, and when the water is very shallow, it will come out of the shallow water, walk across the beach, and re-enter the water. And it can do that because scientists have discovered it can shut down the organs of its body that it's not using to conserve energy, then turn those organs back on when it re-enters the water. That would be as if you could turn off your lungs, go for a deep dive, and turn your lungs back on the beach. Don't do that. Only a shark can do that. You can't do that. Now, sharks, sometimes people have said to me, hey, if we eliminate all the sharks, if they end up going away, what's the big deal? We'll be able to swim anywhere we want. The truth of the matter is sharks are cold-blooded creatures. That means they only swim in warm water. They have to raise their body temperature based on the water around them. The reason that they're going further out, further north into Cape Cod and other areas is because, sadly, as global warming is heating up the planet, it's giving the sharks more places to swim after prey. But if you eliminate all the sharks, how would that improve life on Earth? It won't. Because the problem is, this is a scallop shell. One of the things shark eats are scallops. And scallops contribute to the planet because they eat some algae. If we were to kill all the sharks and there was nothing to eat the scallops, then there'd be nothing to stop the scallops from overpopulating, and that could actually lead to a loss of oxygen in the world's oceans. The world is fit together so that when you start pulling strings, it starts to mess everything else up. So we have sharks, 550 million years. How do they know that? How do they know how long things have been around? This is an impression fossil from the bottom of the ocean. And what you can see on here is all the little pictures of the fossils of ancient shells. Here's a 3D fossil. And it looks just like today's shells. So through carbon dating, they can measure this and figure out how long the shells have been around. And sharks that lose teeth that are found all over the ocean floor, they carbon date them and figure out how long sharks have been around. That's the secret. Bigger than a shark, and still not a fish, is a whale. Think about this for a minute. The largest creature on our entire planet is a blue whale. A blue whale is 90 feet long. That means if you went outside and looked at 3 Greyhound buses lined up for a trip, the whale is the length of those 3 buses. That whale has a heart the size of a small car. It has a tongue heavier than an elephant. But most whales have no teeth. Most whales have filament, like the bristles of a hairbrush. They take in large quantities of water, they strain out tiny food, and they release the water. Now, whales are not fish. Whales are mammals, like you and I. What determines a mammal? To be a mammal, you have to breathe air. Whales may live in the ocean, but they have to surface to breathe air. So, they breathe air. Number 2, all mammals have hair. Now, when you're thinking, I don't remember seeing a hairy whale. If you have one single hair follicle on your body, then you have hair and you're a mammal. Little tiny bumps on the head of a whale, those are the follicles. And third, female whales, like female humans and other mammals, produce milk for their young with mammal glands. That's why they're mammals. And whales give live birth to their young, they nurse their young, and they live in pods and they raise their young. They also communicate with other whales. They send a signal that starts in one group of whales and will be passed around the planet and back again every spring. We don't know what they're saying yet. Maybe someday we'll know. A few whales do have teeth. This is an orca tooth, but people call it a killer whale. They'll have 60 to 100 teeth. A sperm whale will have maybe 6 teeth. Now, in a sperm whale's case, what they do is they use their teeth to hold prey and suck it in. An orca uses their teeth to attack. Whales, being warm-blooded mammals, can swim anywhere on the planet, and they will. They'll swim from the North Pole to the South Pole and back again. The water temperature doesn't bother them. One problem they have is a whale that comes up in the Arctic or the Antarctic underneath the ice needs to get through the ice to breathe. And to do that, sometimes they'll use their teeth. But the problem is, unlike sharks, they don't replace their teeth. So a whale that loses its teeth is going to be a very hungry whale. We doing okay? Let's talk about everybody's favorite seashells. I see seashells. This is a conch shell. Now, when you think about seashells, think about this. This big shell, I'm going to put it on the edge of my finger and bring it up close, if it'll work. See that little tiny thing on my finger? That's how it begins. They lay their seeds in pods like this. They hatch as those little tiny pieces, and starting from this point here, will grow the entire shell. For a seashell creature, what happens is their skeleton is on the outside of their body. Their shell is the skeleton that protects their body from predators, while your skeleton's on the inside. And I know people think, well, my skeleton is so I can run around. But the truth is, mainly your skeleton is to protect soft organs. So your skull protects your brain, your rib cage protects your heart and lungs. The creatures that live in these shells are very soft creatures. This is their skeleton. Now, when you think about the seashells, think about the different kinds of seashells and where they come from. So this one is from the North Atlantic waters, and this one is from Southeast Asia. And if you see the little holes in this one, and sometimes you see holes in the shells, that's because a predator is trying to get in on them. Now, lines on a shell are just like lines in a tree to tell the age of the creature. And when you say a predator is trying to eat them, all right, well, in seashells, their predator can often be a starfish. Now, we call them a starfish, but actually, officially, they're a sea star. They're not a fish. They're not a fish because they don't have a fish bladder, don't have bones. don't have gills. So this starfish, sea star, where do you think the eyes are? Well, it turns out the eyes are on the edge of each foot. The center part here is both their waist and their mouth. And the little filters along here is how they feed food into their body. They live in more shallow water, sandy bottoms. When they move, every leg moves independently. This is the actual creature. They take them out of salt water and allow them to dry. Taking them out of salt water kills them and then they dry. If they're going to eat a creature in a shell, like this one, where those little holes are, they will put their body over the shell. They will force their mouth out and break the shell and suck the creature. And the reason that there's a lot of holes is, remember, that creature is trying to get away. I'm not going to sit still and be eaten. Most people don't want to be sit still and be eaten. Now, before we leave the topic of eating, seafood is the main source of protein for 40% of our planet. But while you probably know you can eat all kinds of fish, can you eat shark? Yes, you can eat shark. And sadly, they're now selling shark in food in fish markets. You can eat conch and other creatures that live in seashells. In case if you ever wondered, how do you get all those shells at the shell shop? I never see that many at the beach. The truth is, to collect this creature, they put out nets, they scoop them up in nets, they take them out of the water, they pull out the creature that lives in here, and they eat it raw, or they eat it fried, or they eat it baked. And then other countries around the world clean out the shells and sell the shells to American shell shops. It's kind of like if you're going to have pork chops tonight, you could clear off the bone and sell it to someone. But the difference is, this looks better on a coffee table than a pork chop bone. Now, amazing thing about these creatures too, and there's all kinds of them, I'll show you a couple other kinds, is that sometimes you'll see them sitting on a rock. How are they sitting on a rock out of the ocean? Why isn't the wave knocking them back into the ocean? That's because, like this little ball, there's minuscule suckers all along their legs, and that enables them to grab hold and stay in place when they want to stay in place. I've got two other kinds of starfish to show you, sea stars. This is a sunrise, greenhouse sun. And again, all these legs, there's an eye at the end of each one of these legs. A starburst sunflower starfish. And this one is a white. Now you might say, hey, I've seen those white ones in blue and pink and green at the store. The truth is, there are some naturally dark navy blue sea stars, but they lose their color upon death, and then what happens is that the stores inject them with dye to make them all those different colors. And I got one more small one here. Now, what do you think? If you were really hungry, could you eat one? Well, I had a very funny way of finding out. I have a crazy beagle. And one day I came home from work and my beagle had eaten my sea star, all but 1 inch. And I called the vet, and the vet said, we have never ever had a dog that did that. Call the Poison Control Center for Animals and find out. I called them and they said, and I quote, the woman said, it's not harmful for a person to eat a sea star, but it's very hard for the creature to be eaten alive. I said, it's a dead sea star. She said, oh, mostly dogs in Florida run in the water and they start gobbling them up, and that's why we say it's harmful to be eaten alive. So if you were ever wondering, I spent $20 on my Visa card to find out what I probably already knew. Nobody wants to be eaten alive. I'm sure you don't either. Ocean is a fascinating place. While we're talking about shells, let's talk about oysters. Okay? People like to eat oysters, but many of you may have pearls. So where do pearls come from? All right, here's the oyster shell. What happens is in the oyster, think of having two shells that come together, like my hands are together. If a bit of sand or something gets inside the shell, oysters don't have a hand to take it out. It'd be like you walking around all day with a rock in your shoe, very uncomfortable. Instead, what the oyster does is secrete a mucus. The mucus covers the grain of sand and keeps the grain of sand from irritating the oyster. That grain of sand covered in mucus eventually hardens, and what we call a pearl, that's what it's oyster mucus. You've never ever seen a jewelry store advertise oyster mucus, but that's actually where it comes from. And the color depends on the type of the oyster. The colors of shells, they depend also, and even fish. When people say, why are tropical fish so brilliant? That's because the warmer the water, the more colorful the fish. So a fish in the North Atlantic waters would be brown. A fish in tropical waters could be all these bright colors, orange and yellows and blues. The same with seashells. Seashells from the North Atlantic tend to be dull. Seashells in warmer waters may be pink and bright and colorful. At least the inside of the shell will be. The warmer the water, the more colorful the fish, the more colorful the food, the more colorful the shells. That's how the planet works. Now, not exactly shells, but often collected is coral. This is one piece of coral. This is another sample. This is mushroom coral. Now, here's the question. Is coral that attaches itself to the bottom of the ocean, see the bottom, attaches itself, is coral alive or is coral a plant? Because it does attach itself to the bottom of the ocean. Here's a good way to remember. Only plants make chlorophyll. So if your friend sets you up on a date with a really dull guy and somebody says, that Joe has all the ability of a houseplant. He's just not interesting. He doesn't do anything. How are you going to know if Joe's really a houseplant? He's not a houseplant if when you go out in the sunlight he doesn't turn green. You see, he eats a bad sushi. And coral is actually millions of tiny microscopic creatures. The largest creature-made item on the entire planet is the Great Coral Reef in Australia. And that Great Coral Reef was created by these teeny tiny creatures. Now, coral is only found in places where the water is 40 feet or less deep, the ocean water. It doesn't survive in deep waters. So that gave some scientists a mystery because they discovered fossilized ancient coral, but they found it very, very deep in the ocean. And their thought was, how could this be so deep in the ocean when coral doesn't live there? Well, you have to realize it's not until the mid-20th century that scientists were able to confirm that the continents actually move. Until that time, people thought, well, the North Atlantic American coast and Europe kind of look like they'd fit together, but that's an illusion, like seeing Elvis's face in a piece of toast. But we now have proof that based on the studies of the edges of continents and other factors, that the continents are moving. While we sit here today, the Pacific, which is the largest ocean on the planet, so large you could almost fit all the other oceans inside of it. But 1 inch at a time, the Pacific is shrinking. One side is folding over the other. And at the same time, the Atlantic Ocean is getting wider, 1 inch at a time, a year, 1 inch in a year. So if you wait about 230,000 years, you'd be able to take a ferry from Los Angeles to Japan. It's going to be a long wait. So now we know that the continents actually move. Knowing the continents move gave them some more clues to some strange things. So remember, they're trying to figure out exactly why would coral be in 40 feet of water. Well, the planet has had 5 ice ages. We had snowball Earth, where the entire planet was covered in ice. And then later, we've had 4 lesser ice ages. The last ice age about 50,000 years ago, 46 to 50,000 years ago, in the United States, the ice came down about halfway across the continent, across the country of the United States, about midway in the country. Now remember, like I said in the beginning, they're not making any more water. All the water that's here is all the water that has to be cycled. So scientists started to realize when we had that last mini ice age and snow fell and built up as ice on the continent, the water had to come from somewhere. That water came from the ocean, which meant there was less liquid water in the ocean, which meant that the coral that's found too deep in water today, fossilized coral, actually Florida was probably 3 times the size of the continent it is today, and therefore when that coral was alive during that ice age, it was only in 40 feet of water. But now it's in much deeper water because things changed. This is a fossil of a shell, and it was found in the top of a mountain in Peru. Now they've found sea life embedded in the sides of the Grand Canyon. Anybody who's been to the Grand Canyon knows the Grand Canyon's a very dry, arid area. So how come there's sea life in there? Fossils. And how come there's fossils on a mountaintop? Because the continents moved. At one time, the United States was under the ocean. The Great Salt Lake in Utah is the last remains of an ocean. The reason it's salty is because the ocean was there, and as the continent moved up and the water drained off, it left behind the salt and the water that's there. It's the exact same story with the Dead Sea in Israel. It's because at one time it was an ocean and it's drying up. Both the Great Salt Lake and the Dead Sea will eventually completely dry up. And if you just wait 500,000 years or so, they believe that the Mediterranean will be the new Dead Sea because the Mediterranean is closing up. In fact, eventually, for the whole planet, they feel we'll be back to one giant continent. But don't need to think about that because that could take 1,000,000 years. So it's not something you want to worry about tonight. Now, the other thing to think about, another mystery for you. Here's a sponge. The sponge, again, attaches itself to the bottom of the ocean. But is a sponge a plant or an animal? Well, remember what I said. Only plants turn green. A sponge is actually an animal. But then you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, if it's an animal, how does it eat? A sponge is a filter feeder. That means it absorbs bits of nutrition from items floating in the water, from little tiny bits of food floating in the water. That's how it lives. So even though it's attached to the ocean floor, it's a living creature, and it does feed that way. And if you think that's a pretty strange way of eating, think about this. Lemon sharks during mating season in Mexico swim with their mouth open, and teeny tiny fish swim in between their teeth, and they eat the remaining food left on the teeth of the shark. Scientists observe this. They have never seen the shark close its mouth on the fish, and they think the only reason is it's a good relationship. The fish get dinner, and the shark, who needs sharp teeth to live, gets a free dental cleaning every season when they come in there for mating. Ocean is full of amazing things. If you were to swim down 6.8 miles to the deepest part of the ocean, first of all, you better work out, because at that depth in the ocean, the pressure on your body would be equal to holding 2 jumbo jets over your head, which is why we've only had 5 vehicles on the whole planet that can reach that far to the bottom of the ocean. All the way down at the bottom of the ocean, in addition to volcanoes, there are creatures that are bioluminescent because no light hits that part. Sunlight doesn't travel that far down. So those creatures, like fireflies, generate light within their body. They're also translucent. They have to be thin in order to withstand the pressure of that. There is life living in the chemical vents at the volcanoes at the bottom of the ocean, which gives scientists hope for life on other planets knowing that life can exist in such extreme conditions in the ocean. The ocean does amazing things for our planet. The ocean is one part of the weather company, the weather service for the planet. Here's how that works. Weather is a combination of water, atmosphere, and sun, temperature of the water. So what happens is they generate the hurricanes, okay? It generates the temperatures flowing over the land. Without the water, without the ocean, you would not have the water control of the planet, the temperature and the water control. The second thing you want to think about is, so it supplies the water that we drink. It's a third factor of the weather. 80% of all the shipping items in the world come by the water. 80% of the stuff in your Walmart came on a shipping cargo on the ocean. The ocean is 40% of the protein of the world. There are people that are living on the fish life, the fish, the whales, the sea creatures, all the creatures, 40% of the protein. But sadly, we are doing a disservice to the ocean. Right now, there's a thing called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. If you were to pull it all together, there's enough plastic in the Pacific Ocean to be the size of the continental United States. We have whales that are washed up dead because their entire insides are wrapped around plastic so they can't breathe anymore. A scientist studied and found 20% of all the seagoing birds have plastic in their bodies because they see plastic floating. So to help our ocean, you need to recycle everything. Think of everything you use as being a circle. Just like the planet recycles the water, you want to recycle the things that you use. People think, well, those plastic water bottles, they get recycled. Sadly, less than 12% of the plastic water bottles are recycled. You recycle very little. You have to change that philosophy and start recycling, or sadly, there's going to be more plastic in the ocean than there's going to be fish. And when you think about eating seafood too, seafood is the last wild creatures that we're eating on the planet. There are no wild cows. Their ancestors are ox. They were developed for food. There are no wild chickens. Their ancestors are the red Asian fowl, again, grown for food. But when you eat fresh seafood, you're eating the livestock of the ocean. And we have to be careful about how much we take, where we raise things, what we use as substitutes. We have to care for this precious planet that we're on. I've got one more creature for you here. This is a manta ray. You see his look. This is the back. This is where it's floating in the ocean. Here's the front. And a ray is not a fish, and not a shark, and not a whale. They're a ray. They're a little bit related to sharks because, like sharks, they have no bones, no fish bladder, only cartilage. This innocent creature swims off the coast. This is its stinger. Wild animals don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to go kill somebody, but they will sting if they feel threatened and endangered. While this is a small one and a devil manta, because these two little parts here, sailors thought stuck up like devil horns when they swam. The largest one of these is 25 feet across, almost the width of a bus. So I want to thank you very much for having me here today, and I hope you've learned something about the ocean, and I want to be open to take any questions that I can help with. So I'm going to turn it.
Hey there.
Oh, I got my seahorses.
Oh, go ahead. You could tell me about the seahorses.
All right, Anthony, you and your wife. I can't remember. Do you have children? I can't remember.
Oh, yeah. 3
All right.
kids, 6 grandkids.
Wow. Okay. Well, you'll definitely remember this. Did you give birth?
No.
No. Well, then Anthony is not a seahorse, folks, because in a seahorse, the female has the eggs. They are transferred to the pouch of the male, and the male gives birth. And I don't know any woman who would have forgotten that. So if your husband didn't give birth to your children, you're not married to a seahorse.
I'm not even sure what to say to that one. Well, Gloria, thanks. So I now know that I can eat sharks, but we don't want to date a shark.
Right. Don't want
Yes.
to date a shark. You don't want to date a shark, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, where can people find more about your programs? What's your website?
Oh, so the website is scienceforseniors.net,
All right.
and you for scienceforseniors.net. And I also have a Science for Seniors on Facebook. So I
Great.
have both of those.
All
And if
right.
they get Activity Connection, my information is at the end of the Mad Scientist article on Activity Connection. And if they want a book, which has step-by-step directions on how to do science, I'm on Amazon.
There you go. Got everything covered. And if
Yep.
all else fails, just contact Sage Stream and we'll hook you up. Well, Gloria,
Yep. Just
thank you so much. I'm going to close the program with a couple house cleaning announcements, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.
thank you very much, Anthony. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
All right. Well, thank you, Gloria. Put those away. I need those so we don't have feedback from our artists. So thank you, Gloria. So here's how about these for kind of crazy QR codes, right? These are the always free ones, hopefully. That top one is today's evaluation. If you're watching this, especially those watching on a replay, do that. And then the one below here, right there is my song list. Have not received any requests. So you're probably going to get what I give you, but it'll still be fun. That's Friday at 2. Tomorrow we have Tom Padovano. And then on Thursday morning, Tom's at 10. And then Thursday morning at 10, we have Leah Miller. She's going to teach us how to paint sunflowers. And then I'll wrap things up at 2 o'clock on Friday. We know that there are more viewers watching these after the fact, hundreds in fact. And so we ask, leave comments even when you're watching them on, when we're done here and the video is just up on Facebook. And certainly when you get to the end here and you see these QR codes, scan them and give us an evaluation, because it's very important that we have a proof of concept to bring to others to show them what a great resource this is. We're still somewhat COVID hampered, and we could use a network like Sage Stream to supplement your activities, giving all the flux that there is in the profession right now and in the industry. Our entertainer yesterday, Jessa, we cheered her up actually last night or yesterday afternoon, because she was a little bummed because a few things that she was planning got canceled because of COVID. So it's still a very, very real thing. Plus, where are you going to get the diversity of the talent that we've brought you? While Gloria is a familiar face to you, Jessa and Inez and Andrea Miller and on, you've probably never seen before. And we think it beats just watching old celebrities on YouTube. And we hope you agree. So fill out the evaluation. We'll see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. It's going to be a shorter program, probably 30 minutes. Tom Padovano, he's a comic. He's written for Rodney Dangerfield and those types of folks. That should be fun for those who like that kind of humor. I've heard a little bit of it, and it's sort of like it's between roll your eyes and laugh out loud. But Tom's a great guy. He's been doing this for a while, and we want to support him absolutely. So, folks, take you out with our normal theme music, and we'll see you tomorrow.